My goodness, the little squares are just, it's like flowers coming up in the spring or something. Popping, here we go. So let's have a few minutes of sitting together, enjoying the silence and stillness and the focus that comes with such sitting and all the chaos that doesn't feel like focus at all as you sit, but allowing others to sit with you and hold you up and hold you in their heart as they do so. There's a small verse that we offer at the end of Jukai ceremonies and ordinations. There's a version of it that's at the end of our meal chant when we're in intensives. And it's just 3 lines. And so I'm going to say the first line, and then you all say it back. And I'll say the second line. So we'll just do that call and response, okay? Very simple. First line. We live like a cloud in an endless sky. Like a lotus in muddy water. One with the pure mind of Buddha. Can do your best and we'll say it together, okay? Because if we do it 2 more times, you'll probably get it by that time, okay? We live like a cloud in an endless sky, like a lotus in muddy water, one with the pure mind of Buddha. We live like a cloud in an endless sky, like a lotus in muddy water, one with the pure mind of Buddha. I've always I always loved that little verse because, of course, in such a small but powerful poetic way, it speaks to what appears to us as this dual nature that we live in, which is actually one thing. And by the way, the word in some of the original languages that's translated as mind, the mind of Buddha, is also heart mind. They aren't separate. There's all these implicit, what appears to be dualities. We live like a cloud in an endless sky, the absolute spacious freedom of liberation. And we're rooted in the mud, like a lotus is, that beautiful image of enlightenment. And we all know these images, you've heard them many times. And the kind of cheeky phrase, no mud, no lotus, no ordinary life, no blossoming. So we know these things. I I had something I was making some notes on that I thought would be possibly useful to talk about today. And then I woke up this morning and decided to do something totally different. So I've had an interesting morning because I have to go with what's alive. And of course, we've just been at the cusp of the equinox, as you know. Um, and most of us know this, but the spring equinox, which we've just passed, just in the last 24 hours or so, it marks this first day of what is be spring in the northern hemisphere. I think all of us are in the northern hemisphere. We go around it, but I don't know if we have anybody in the south. And it's the day in which the sun's rays shine at the equator. So while the Earth sits with its axis not tilted either toward or away from the sun, so it causes 12 hours of sunlight almost everywhere on the Earth. We kind of know this. But I thought the image was really profound. It stayed with me because for a brief moment, it's really kind of like a moment. It seems longer, but the Earth neither turns away nor turns toward, even as it's turning. It's not tilted. It's sort of upright in the midst of this dynamic energy of the universe. This is our zazen. This is our sitting, and it's way beyond what we as small humans can conceive of. The dynamic energy of the universe. We can have an image of the Earth because we have our globes and we have beautiful telescopes and also the kinds of uh, imagery that we see through animation. But this brief period of neither leaning into or away from something, this is essential in our practice, being upright in that dynamic energy of the universe beyond what we can conceive of really. But we're in the midst of, think of the earth now, it's constant movement and change. Every particle of matter, every unique planet and moon, every immense star and entire galaxies, all moving in a mutual dance of responsive energies without any gap. You know, in our teachings, we speak about impermanence, things changing, that the entire universe is nothing but change. It's this dance that we're in the midst of. And then there are the teachings that go along with impermanence on interbeing, mutual causality, interdependence. That's the music that moves the dance of the whole universe and every little simple thing in it, every cloud in the sky, every lotus in the mud. And with these two, we also hear the teachings of emptiness or no self, which is just the way we understand these things, impermanence and interdependence, which basically amount to awe in the face of it all. But we're in our body, we're still that lotus in the, it's the embodied inconceivable, which we are actually living, whether we appreciate it or not. It's still the case. There's a small phrase from a poem from Rilke in which he says something about the daily struggles we have, and yet this inconceivable. He says, and yet though we strain against the deadening grip of daily necessity, we strain against the deadening grip of daily necessity, I sense there is this mystery. All life is being lived. Who's living it then? Is it the things themselves, or something waiting inside them like an unplayed melody in a flute? It's such an interesting image. We are living this inconceivable life, which looks ordinary day to day, but when we engage our practices, we open to a perspective which shifts the daily necessity into something a little different. And our practice is, you know, to wake up to this fact, this reality, this mystery, not figure it out or explain it, but to live it together. But then from our small human perspective, as we live as and with this whole mystery on this planet, in relationship to our generously warming star we call the sun, humans have noticed over the centuries that there is a moment of alignment in which the energy from that star, the sun, shines onto the equator, the very center of our living globe, while the earth sits upright with its axis, I say upright, tilted neither toward or away from the sun, and there's 12 hours of sunlight pretty much everywhere. And of course, we know the Buddha taught the middle way. And he taught the middle way after hearing, in the history anyway, it talks about him hearing music from a lute that was on a barge going down the river. And he could hear this music, and he realized, oh, if the strings are too loose, there's no music. If they're too tight, they break. It's the middle way which allows this music the music of the spheres to be heard and to be played. So this middle way, neither leaning this way or that, there's something about that. And of course, we can continue the metaphor. It's kind of interesting to think of there through the seasons, the Earth does tilt on its axis as it's rotating, and we do too. We do tilt far away sometimes and toward sometimes. And there are days when we seem to have a lot of darkness and others we seem to have a lot of light. And so that imagery continues. But I was looking up the etymology of the word equinox because I was curious about it. And actually, it comes from the root equal night. It doesn't come from a root that's equal day or light, equal night. And in the Buddhist teachings, and certainly in the way I understand it from the Zen tradition and some of our ancestors, the dark or night isn't thought of as something obscured or where we're lost. In the Zen tradition, the dark is thought of as the absolute. Because in the dark, all the distinctions and divisions, you can't, everything's one thing. It's in the light when all the divisions come in, you can see distinctions. And there's one of our key pieces in our liturgy, the Sandokai, which is translated as the merging of difference and unity, or sameness and difference. There's a line that says, the spiritual source shines clear in the light, the branching streams flow on in the dark. The source shines clear in the light, branching streams flow on in the dark. So darkness is taken as the absolute, in which the streams of Dharma, the streams of awakening, flow in the dark. And the darkness where divisions and details disappear. Everything seems to be one. Later in that same poem, it says, in light, there is darkness, but don't take it as darkness. In dark, there's light, but don't see it as light. Think of the yin yang symbol. One side is dark, but there's that little white dot. There's Taoist symbology in here, obviously. But as we wake up, all the teachers, ancestors, sages have reminded us not to grasp at either side. Don't grasp at just my life here and try to sort it all out, but also don't grasp at emptiness and whatever you want to call it, wakefulness of the absolute, try to get away from life. You can't plant seeds in the sky, they can't grow. But you don't want to get stuck in the mud either. And you want to be able to lift yourself and others up and realize they're not in opposition, the relative and the absolute. Yet they appear that way in our everyday eye. And now and then, just now and then, and a couple times a year, the earth shows us this merging of difference and unity, this balance of light and dark for a moment, because we call them that. But really, it's just the dynamic dance of the universe, and we notice these things. You can think of the ways in which you call and name and feel things as dark, which you might think of as heavy or difficult. And yet in that darkness, if you don't take it as darkness, if you don't see it as darkness, like in the Sandokai, maybe there's something else there. We might grasp for the light, but the light sometimes obscures other things or is blinding, and we grasp it, we miss what's flowing more deeply. All these images you're aware of. And the equinox, I think, reminds us of this. Equal night. throughout the earth, there's an equal taste of the absolute, the depths. And with this everyday thing on our earth and the small perspectives that we have as humans, it's, I think, beautifully expressed. And of course, I'm going to go to poetry because that's the way some of this stuff moves most easily. And who better to speak to the earthly challenges and delights but Mary Oliver and this brief poem. So I'll read it and then I'll go back and make a couple of comments. It's not very long. The title is a settlement. A settlement. And she starts, look at spring. And here we are on the first days. Look at spring. And last year's loose dust has turned into this soft willingness. The windflowers have come up trembling. Slowly, the brackens are uplifting their curvaceous and pale bodies. The thrushes have come home, none less than filled with mystery, sorrow, happiness, music, ambition. And I'm walking out into all of this with nowhere to go and no task undertaken but to turn the pages of this beautiful world over and over in the world of my mind. Therefore, dark past, I'm about to do it. I'm about to forgive you for everything. You know, in true Mary Oliver style, she grounds us in the earth and then turns on us at the end to another place which opens our hearts and our minds. Look at spring, she says, and here we are. And last year's loose dust has turned into this soft willingness. This soft willingness. If there's anything that I think is important to enter practice, to sit with each other in inquiry, to walk with each other as spiritual friends, to just be able to live together over the years, as so many of us have done together, requires a soft willingness. Certainly there's times in which a fierceness is called for. But ultimately in her title, A Settlement, as we settle, there's this soft willingness. To do what? Well, she speaks of the flowers coming up trembling. And don't we? Come up through our lives. However robust we might look, there's a trembling underneath. And the bracken, she said, are lifting their curvaceous and pale bodies. And we feel this tenderness, this vulnerability of what it means to be alive. Knowing as we're born, we're headed towards death. And that's all one thing, that's all one life. And then she mentions the return of the thrush. But all of us take refuge, we return, we come back, we find out where we are over and over and over again, full of, she says, mystery, sorrow, happiness, music, ambition, all these qualities of not knowing. What is this? Over and over, we ask the question, what the heck is this life? And then we meet a sorrow, and we think, oh, it's sorrowful. Or we meet a happiness, it's joyful. We have this distinction of light and dark again. But if we can listen to the music, she says, and notice our ambition, notice what we're called to, and what we're dragged into, what we long for, And then she shifts and says, and I'm walking out into all of this. That's a great line to think as you make that step and bow into the Zendo. And now I'm walking out into all of this. with nowhere to go and no task undertaken. We come into the meditation hall or to the corner of our bedroom or wherever we sit, or the field where we take our walking meditation next to us. I'm walking out into all of this with nowhere to go and no task undertaken, but to turn the pages of this beautiful world over and over. Each breath, each step, each long and tedious moment of sitting, each bright and wonderful and generous moment of sitting, depending on how it feels at the moment. I'm turning the pages of the beautiful world over and over in the world of my mind, and I would say also of my heart. Because through our mind and our heart, we take the world in and we respond back to the world. That's our life. And so she speaks of spring and renewal, of everything that it brings, the relative. That's the mud and the lotus. And then she speaks of walking out with nothing to do, nowhere to go, but to turn the page. This is the absolute, the great mystery that's embodied, the embodied inconceivable. And in that moment of ordinary human life, within this great mystery, she does something incredibly human and ordinary. She says, therefore, dark past, all my conditioning, my karma, all the things that I've carried around, the burdens of my life, I'm about to do it. I'm about to forgive you for everything. There are those mysterious kind of words in Dogen's teachings where he says, body and mind of themselves drop away. It's like, what is that? I think it has to do with setting down the burden of our past. In one moment, at one time in the year, it appears in our tiny little mind that the earth stands still and it's just this equal, it's upright. But that's just an image. There's not too much dark and there's not too much light. It's just our life. We speak about, self and no self. What am I going to forgive? What am I going to let go of? What do I set aside when I take a posture of zazen? We're not going to get a better past, but we have the opportunity to have a new relationship with it all. The traumas don't suddenly disappear, but maybe we don't live them out the same way. Our addictions and things that have plagued us, maybe we don't continue to practice in the same way. We have a soft willingness, turning the pages of our beautiful life, your life, full of mystery and sorrow, happiness, music, and ambition. And that requires not to be without a self, but a self that is unburdened, not caught in the self-centered dream, a self that's not caught. And so those are some of the musings that came to me as I thought about the equinox, about this moment of where the earth and the universe shows us what we think of as the middle way. And then there's the dynamic all around it. The middle way isn't let's see, what do we call it in the church of my childhood? The straight and narrow. It's a wide space. There is the center of gravity, of home, of uprightness, around which we orbit and move and walk through our lives together with each other. So on this essentially first day of or second day of spring, depending on where you are, and this moment of movement into more light after an equal darkness, what is moving in you right now? What music do you hear? What dance are you dancing? How are you walking uh, through your life? Please raise your hand if you'd like to meet around these things. Thank you for listening.
I have Maru.
Hola.
Hola, hola to everybody. This morning, as I was coming into the studio, I walked by these barrels that I have where I planted daffodils and tulips,
Ah,
and yeah, and they are under the earth, right? And
haven't come up yet.
not there yet, not out. And so I'm looking at them, and I noticed some of them had this um, transparent layer of eyes on top.
Mm.
And I felt, oh, I wonder what's going on there, you know? And then when we were sitting, I had this almost like it felt not that my mind went to the daffodils, but that the daffodils came to me. You know, the
Mm.
of all these daffodils came to me as being there, um, so um, centered and like swallowing and popping, starting to go up, you know, and I felt this presence so strongly and so like everywhere
Mm-hmm.
around, and as if I was a daffodil myself, you know,
Mm-hmm.
is such a tangible and um, elemental experience,
Yes, yes, yes.
brightness.
Mm. This uplift.
Yeah, and being in the dark, um,
Mm-hmm.
and what came was this almost like a subtle proposition, as if um, this soft willingness really, what really spoke to this. What if the only thing that I need to be occupied with is to allow everything to sprout around me, including myself?
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. And I love the image of without the darkness and the settlement, the bud doesn't begin. Without the light, it's not drawn up. And I think in my own garden sometimes I feel the self-centered dream looks like I wish they would hurry. I wish they would go faster. I wish they would do it a certain way. But the soft willingness, which allows things to grow at their own pace, is teaching me. So they're coming to me. I'm not in charge of them.
It feels also almost like this a blind trust of light
Mhm.
under the earth, under the soil.
Mhm. Absolutely. All the elements come together, things respond. And in some ways, I think that's our practice. We try to bring elements together which are wholesome, and we naturally respond.
Yeah,
We don't have to force the blossom,
yeah.
naturally respond. We were talking about aging yesterday. I was speaking with Bronwyn over at the Hui, you know, of course, and we were talking about how the image of the flower comes up in a rose, so beautiful, you know, and it just bring, and then it begins to wrinkle, and the petals begin to fall apart. We were talking about the whole cycle of aging, you know, and where we are. But that's one is not better than the other. It's the way it goes. Of course, we have preferences because we cling to life, natural as human animals. But thank you for your teaching, Maru. It's very beautiful. And I guess from your home, this would not be the first day of spring, it'd be the first day of fall,
Mm-hmm.
huh? In Buenos Aires.
Yeah.
I forget about that. Yeah.
I guess that's why I like macadamia trees because they bloom and give fruit at the same time. It's all happening.
All happening, yeah.
Tree, right?
Right. Like us, living and dying at the same moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have Cassie.
Hey, Cass.
Hey, I feel intimidated and a little tender, and I'm noticing the connection from where you're speaking from is really, really quite nice. And I guess what, prompted me to raise my hand is that, I think I don't have ideas about something until you flip it on me. And then I'm just like, oh, I totally had a presumption there.
That's my job.
um, but the straight and narrow being a very, very wide path just was just like, oh, that fits. That's so that it just seems so true. And the part
No.
about equal, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm just saying, I know you grew up with that same image.
Hmm,
Um,
yeah,
it's like, oh, yeah. There is the stripe in the middle of the highway, but you need the whole highway.
yeah. Um, so I had two other things that I can't pull up right now.
Take a moment and just have a few breaths. If they come, they come. If they don't, they don't. That's not important. Straight and narrow. I flipped it on you.
Yeah, and there's something about a need to fill the space that isn't really important.
Um, but
Um,
there's an urge.
yeah,
If I don't fill the space, then
I would say I'm not doing anything, that I'm not participating, I'm not engaging. And yet I'm also having the idea that that's not true, that if I don't fill the space, I actually am engaging more.
glad you said it. That's not always the case, but sometimes it is, isn't it?
Yeah,
The times when you and I are together, and or any of us, and there's some spacious, quiet intimacy,
yeah.
that's not a waste, is it?
No, it's like the most fulfilling part for me.
Uh-huh.
Um, and this thing about, having ideas and then, oh, if you're thinking, then you're off.
Well, thinking is going to continue. It's believing you're thinking,
Okay.
because you're not going to be able to stop your mind, probably. There are times when it's less active, sure. But
Right.
minds think, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with thinking. It's that when we believe the virtual reality
Uh,
as we create it,
uh, and that idea of being, being ready to forgive the past,
Yep,
or whatever that actually, yeah, that was, because if I hadn't had my past, I wouldn't be here.
that's
And
right.
if I hadn't had my past, it wouldn't mean to me what this means to me.
It's the clinging that makes the problem. That's the self-centered dream. And you remember the John O'Donohue blessing where it starts, may all that is unforgiven in you
Unforgiven.
be released,
Yeah.
just let go of. So you don't cling to it. It's going to be there. But we cling and then make something out of it and then live the life that we've made out of it instead of the life we're actually living.
Yeah.
You don't have to get rid of yourself. What you let go of is the dream. That's what falls away, not the self. We need a self to be here and do things. But the self-centered dream. And unfortunately, as you know well, sometimes religions are a substitute dream.
Yeah.
Let's have this dream, not that dream. Instead of free of dream, people are frightened of not having the dream. That's why you want to fill the space. Because it takes not a soft willingness to be kind to yourself, but it takes a lot of courage to not live the dream.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it offers so much juice. And then I
Absolutely.
think that juice is the aliveness, and it's
That's right.
not.
You want to live a life with no drama? That's boring.
Right. There was some analogy that you gave like a long time ago about a dry sponge, and where a little bit of water comes into just one spot of it, or just putting, and how intense the sponge might feel about that little bit of water, or just putting the sponge in a, in a pool. Um, and it all soaks up from everywhere. So that juice, I often think, is when it's only coming from that one spot instead of the wide path that you were talking about just a minute ago.
Yeah. And the way we're
Whatever reason, that comes back to me a bunch.
continuing that, well, the way we are penetrated by our steadiness of practice, even when it's not dramatic, especially when it's not dramatic. And I think even in practice discussion group last week, I might have used an image that came from Suzuki Roshi, where he talked about in San Francisco in the early morning, it was often foggy, walking from his residence to the temple in his robes. And when he got to the temple, he went inside and realized he was wet. But he was never went through the rain or anything. It's like he slowly penetrated by the walking through. And this is how we are in our practice.
Yeah. Thanks, buddy.
See you soon.
Okay.
Oh, he's Marley.
Good afternoon.
Hi. You briefly mentioned, well, you were talking a little bit about music, the Buddha and the lute on the barge, beautiful. But before that, you mentioned something, I wasn't sure if it was a reference to Renier Marie Rilke or not, but it was about an unplayed melody in a flute.
Yeah, that was from the Rilke poem.
Okay, okay. And my curiosity is whether the unplayed melody is being withheld from the world, or is it enriching the flute, or does it matter?
It could be either way. The imagery in the larger poem that Rilke has talked about, um, the sort of title of that poem is No One Lives Their Life. It's about what's being withheld. But in this part of the poem, he's talking about there is a life that's actually moving. You can call it stepping forward and living your life or withholding your life, but you both are living. That's the way you're living. Life is always there, but we have these images like, where's the music? Is like, is it in the flute or is it in the playing of the, where's the music? It's like waiting to be played. Life is waiting for you to engage it fully. So the music that comes out is Marla-ness, or Flint-ness or whatever.
So there's no real obligation to play the melody, or
Well, using the imagery that we're using right now, obligation, you have been given a life. And so it's probably a good idea to go ahead and live it. And so obligation, there's kind of an interesting responsibility because of the gift, because it's immense.
it seems kind of lovely to think about holding an unplayed melody too. Just
And there are moments we do that, isn't it? It's very private and sweet and dear. And other times we burst out into the expression,
yeah, that's usually me.
as you were known to do, right? But also you're exploring this other side too of silence and simplicity and solitude, uh, of what it's like to. I mean, you see a beautiful grand piano sitting there, not making any sound, but there's something about it. You know all that's in there. But to play it, you have to sit down and engage it. But there are times when it's just there, and other times when it's being played. And that's your life. It's back and forth. We think of them as dualistic, but
Yeah.
there's something moving in you about this.
Well, it is those words, unplayed melody in a flute. Those
Be a
beautiful,
koan.
beautiful.
Yeah, let that be a koan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Laurie.
She says with great joy, Lori.
Hi there.
Hi there.
So I'm actually kind of coming forward to report things from the 100th year birthday that we celebrated for my mother.
It happened. Huh?
It happened,
She
and
reached 100.
say what?
She reached 100 years.
She reached 100.
Mm.
So I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but I had thought that I would come forward and say something, at the event. So I was kind of like the master of ceremonies at the beginning, and um, I never would have done that if I hadn't come to know you. I'd have been in the corner the whole time.
Was that a good news or bad news?
That's good news.
Okay.
Coming forward. And that's what it was about, was coming forward. And so I was grateful for that opportunity. It was kind of scary. In my family, it wasn't often a safe place to come forward. So I knew I was pushing the edge there, but I thought, nah, I think I can do this. So I did. And afterward, my mother said, "Who was that person?"
Did she? But she didn't mean metaphorically. She actually didn't know it was you.
She knew it was me, but she just meant she didn't recognize me as,
Oh,
she
got
said,
it.
"You're so self-assured," which,
Yeah, who is that? She hadn't seen that
who
one.
is it? Yeah. So,
It's great that one time in her life she saw that.
yeah, that's kind of how I felt. So that was really frightening for me and to do it, and then also gratifying in a way.
Hmm.
But she had a lot of how much time, and I know I don't have much time. I should stop. Maybe that's enough for now.
Thank you for telling us that, and thank you for letting us know her reflection that she can. Because I've seen that in you too, as you've taken this sometimes shaky but important seat as a teacher. I've said one of the main things that I've noticed is you come forward. It's like, wow, who's that?
mhm.
Because I know it's in you, or we wouldn't have invited you to take that seat.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're letting yourself grow into it.
Yeah, little by little. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord.
What was Bridget gone? We had Bridget.
Uh-oh, where'd she go?
Sure. There she is.
There she is. Oh,
Best check that she hasn't changed her mind because I've just brought her forward.
Well, this will be the lightning round. So much has touched me by each person who's come forward, but you made reference to a poem that I don't know how to spell the name of or the source, but you talked about the Sunderkai. What is that? Or how do you spell it?
Yeah, well, you don't really need the Japanese name if you don't want, but it's Sandokai,
Okay.
Sandokai. Um, and it's a classical poem from one of our Zen ancestors that we often chant in the liturgy and morning service for longer services. It's back in the old days when Peg and I were practicing in more traditional temples, we chanted in Japanese, and it's a little kind of a complicated one. But the English versions, the merging of difference and unity is one of the English translations of the title can be. So it's this understanding of what we see as different actually is one thing. And if you look in the Appamada chant book, you can find both the English and the Japanese.
Okay.
And for anyone who doesn't know, if you go to the Appamada website, and Peg just put it in chat, you can see it too. You can download the PDF of the whole chant book from the Appamada website.
Great.
But it's in there, and so it's a classic piece.
Okay. Well, I didn't recognize the Japanese name, but I do have the chant book and I'll look into it. It just seemed to capsulize when you made reference to it, this feeling of push and pull that I'm feeling with regard to my son, who isn't in touch right now, and how I can hold both these things at the same time. And I'm
Yes.
really grateful because the practice here is allowing me to view this in a different way and not stay fixed on my self-centered dream of feeling like a failure as a parent, that I'm still growing and emerging. So it'll have its way of growing both of us. And thank you. The analogy of the spring is so great. And my uncle's birthday is on today, and I always think of him because I didn't know him very well. But when I learned that he was dying and I was out in California for a college interview, my mom said perhaps I could go visit him, and I did. And he was in his hospital bed. He had chosen to die at the hospital, and he had brought a painting from home. And I'm an artist in a way, and so we talked about his painting, and I just felt moved as I was obviously an older teenager, but I just said, Uncle Tom, can I lay down on your bed for a minute? And he said, oh, sure, honey. And we'd never been that close. I mean, he just came to visit sometimes, but we had calls from him, and it just to be able to say goodbye to someone that way, even at that young age, I think it was a comfort to both of us. And I just am grateful. Thank you.
It still moves you now.
It does. And it's so important for us to both hold on and let go at the same time.
Yes, you're giving us a beautiful example of the practical way these things move through us. Absolutely.
So thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Bridget. And so let's intone the four practice principles, which remind us of exactly what each person has spoken of so beautifully today, and which Bridget was reminding us of here towards the end. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher. Being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Welcome to spring.
Thank you so much, Flint. Thank you. And thank you all so much for being here. And if you'd like to offer Dana to Flint, and we have other teachers here this evening, Peg and Joel and Laurie, then please do go to the website at apamada.org/contribute, and there you'll find lots of opportunities. Just write, if it's not clear, just write in the box who or what you'd like your contribution to go towards. But thank you all so much for being here. More than anything else, it's just wonderful to see you all. And if you'd like to continue with me and others for a further 30 minutes, please do pop yourself into gallery view and we'll continue for a further 30 minutes. Thank you all so much. Thank you.